I was staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, the cursor blinking over a single, undeleted line of text in my Gmail trash folder. Cancellation confirmation. Your reservation at the Hawthorne Botanical Mansion has been revoked, and the $50,000 refund has been issued. My chest seized. The air rushed out of my lungs like I'd been kicked in the ribs by a horse. 2 weeks. I was exactly 2 weeks away from marrying the love of my life, and my wedding was gone. Erased. I scrolled down, my hands trembling so violently I could barely work the trackpad, my eyes scanning the forwarding address for the six-figure refund check. It was a P.O. box. A P.O. box in a zip code I recognized instantly, because it was exactly 3 blocks away from my older sister's luxury apartment. The sister I had spent my entire life accommodating. The sister I had made my maid of honor just to keep the peace. The sister my parents insisted was simply going through a hard time and needed to feel included. She hadn't just tried to steal my thunder. She had systematically, maliciously destroyed the biggest day of my life, and she fully intended to let me show up in my white dress to locked doors. The betrayal tasted like battery acid in the back of my throat. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark, the sickening puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. To understand how a 27-year-old woman ends up holding the smoking gun of a felony wire fraud committed by her own flesh and blood, you have to understand the toxic, suffocating ecosystem I was raised in. You have to understand Chloe. Chloe is 3 years older than me, but emotionally she has been perpetually trapped in the terrible twos. In our family, there was a fundamental law of physics. Gravity pulled objects toward the earth, and every ounce of attention, resources, and emotional bandwidth pulled toward Chloe. She wasn't just a golden child in the traditional sense, she was a black hole of need. If she wasn't the center of the universe, she would supernova, taking everyone down with her. And my parents, God bless their conflict-avoidant souls, were her primary enablers. They didn't just walk on eggshells around her. They paved the entire house in them and handed out tap shoes. Growing up, my role was the peacekeeper, the shock absorber, the easy child. My achievements were acknowledged with a passing pat on the back, usually followed by an immediate pivot to how my success might affect Chloe's self-esteem. I remember my 16th birthday. I had saved up for months from a part-time job at a local bakery to buy this specific, gorgeous sapphire blue dress for my party. I left it hanging on the back of my bedroom door. The morning of my party, I found it lying on my bed with a massive, jagged tear right down the front bodice. Chloe stood in the doorway, a pair of fabric scissors in her hand, looking entirely unbothered. "I was trying to cut a loose thread for you," she had said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Oops, my hand slipped. I had cried, of course, a jagged, heartbroken teenage cry. When my parents came running, my mother had looked from the ruined dress to Chloe's perfectly blank face, and then she turned to me. "Oh, honey," my mother had sighed, rubbing her temples as if I was the one giving her a headache. "You know how clumsy your sister is. She was just trying to help. Don't make a scene on your birthday. Just wear the floral sundress from last year. Be the bigger person." Be the bigger person, that was the family motto. It was the rug under which 2 decades of psychological abuse, manipulation, and blatant sabotage were swept. When I graduated college summa cum laude, a milestone my parents had heavily hyped up to their country club friends, Chloe suddenly developed a debilitating, blinding migraine exactly 20 minutes before the commencement ceremony began. She wailed in the bleachers, clutching her head, loudly sobbing that the stadium lights were making her nauseous. My parents, entirely incapable of telling her to go wait in the car, panicked. They left. They actually packed up and left the stadium to take her home. When my name was called and I walked across the stage, looking out into the sea of proud families cheering for their children, the 4 seats reserved for my family were empty. I took an Uber back to my dorm room alone, holding my diploma, while my phone buzzed with texts from my mother asking me to pick up ginger ale for Chloe on my way home. That was the toxic normal. That was the baseline of my existence. I learned to minimize my joys, to shrink myself down so I wouldn't cast a shadow that might offend my sister. I built a life that was quiet, independent, and entirely self-sufficient. I moved out the day I turned 18, put myself through graduate school, and secured a fantastic job as an art director for an advertising agency. I thought distance would cure the dynamic. I thought if I just built my own life, Chloe couldn't touch it. And then, I met Liam. Liam was an anomaly. He was the kind of man you read about in fiction but never expect to find in the wild. He was a junior partner at an investment firm, fiercely intelligent, deeply kind, and grounded in a way that made me feel like I had finally found solid earth after a lifetime at sea. But the most shocking thing about Liam wasn't his success or his striking good looks, it was his family. The first time I met Liam's parents, Arthur and Alina, I was practically vibrating with anxiety. I expected the kind of high society snobbery you see in movies, or at the very least, the kind of dysfunctional undercurrents I was so used to navigating. Instead, I walked into a home filled with genuine warmth. Arthur, a self-made man who had built a real estate empire from nothing, was imposing but incredibly generous, with a booming laugh and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense. Alina was elegant, sharp-witted, and immediately enveloped me in a bear hug, asking me questions about my career and actually listening to the answers. Watching Liam interact with his parents was a revelation. They didn't manipulate each other. They didn't guilt-trip. They communicated with respect, set healthy boundaries, and celebrated each other's successes without a hint of jealousy. It was a masterclass in functional family dynamics, and it threw the horrifying reality of my own family into sharp, agonizing relief. For the first time in my life, I realized that what I had endured wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was pathology. Liam and I dated for 3 years. In that time, he became my shield. He saw right through Chloe's fragile victimhood charades. When she tried to invite herself on our first anniversary trip to Napa, claiming she was going through a rough breakup and needed a getaway, Liam was the one who politely but firmly told her no over the phone, while my mother hyperventilated in the background about how cruel we were being. It was the first time I had ever seen anyone tell Chloe no and actually stick to it. She was furious, of course, but for the first time, I felt protected. The proposal happened in Kyoto, Japan, under a canopy of cherry blossoms. It was intimate, quiet, and breathtakingly perfect. When Liam slipped the custom-designed, 2-carat oval diamond onto my finger, I cried tears of pure, unadulterated joy. But as we boarded the 14-hour flight back to the States, a cold, heavy dread began to settle in my stomach. The joy was already being eclipsed by the inevitable reality of having to tell my family. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Chloe would not let me have this. I was right. Liam's parents insisted on hosting our engagement party at their sprawling estate in the Hamptons. It was an exquisite affair: string quartets, champagne towers, catering that belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was exactly the kind of elegant, sophisticated event that made Chloe seethe with envy. She arrived an hour late, flanked by our parents, wearing a dress that can only be described as a bridal gown. It was floor-length, shimmering ivory silk, with a plunging neckline and a dramatic train. She swept onto the terrace, immediately loudly complaining about the traffic, ensuring every eye was on her. My mother pulled me aside almost instantly. "Don't say anything about the dress," she hissed, gripping my arm tight enough to bruise. "She's very insecure right now because she's single. Just let her have this. It's your party, you have nothing to be jealous of." Jealous? The absolute delusion of it made me want to scream, but I clamped my jaw shut. "Be the bigger person," I chanted in my head. "Just get through the night." But a white dress wasn't enough for Chloe. 2 hours into the party, just as Arthur tapped his glass to make a heartfelt toast to Liam and me, Chloe suddenly surged forward, grabbing a silver spoon and furiously clinking it against her champagne flute. The sharp, grating noise cut through the gentle murmur of the crowd. "Hi, everyone," she announced, her voice pitched unnaturally high. Her face was flushed, her eyes gleaming with a manic kind of excitement. "Since we're all here celebrating family and new beginnings, I thought this would be the absolute perfect time to share my own little secret." The terrace went dead silent. Arthur lowered his glass, his expression darkening. Liam's hand tightened around my waist like a vice. Chloe placed both hands flat against her completely flat stomach and beamed. "I'm pregnant." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. My mother burst into immediate, hysterical tears of joy, rushing forward to embrace her. My father looked shell-shocked. The attention, completely and entirely, had shifted. The engagement party was instantly hijacked. For the next hour, guests awkwardly shuffled around, unsure whether to congratulate me on my wedding or my sister on her immaculate conception, seeing as she hadn't had a boyfriend in 8 months. I stood by the champagne tower, feeling completely hollowed out. Eleanor, Liam's mother, walked up beside me, her posture impeccably straight, her eyes fixed on Chloe, who was currently holding court by the hors d'oeuvres. "She's lying, isn't she?" Eleanor asked, her voice low, cool, and entirely matter-of-fact. I looked at Eleanor, startled by her bluntness. I don't know. "She's lying," Eleanor concluded softly, taking a sip of her champagne. "And she is a remarkably deeply disturbed young woman. You are going to have to watch your back with that one, my dear." Eleanor was right. 3 days later, after the engagement party had been thoroughly ruined and my parents had spent a small fortune buying baby clothes, Chloe casually mentioned in a family group chat that it was a false alarm. A faulty test. A tragic, heartbreaking misunderstanding. My parents rallied around her, showering her with sympathy, flowers, and spa days to help her grieve. When I tried to point out the extreme convenience of her timing, my father called me callous and unfeeling. That was the moment the final, fraying thread of my patience snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just went cold. I decided right then and there that my wedding was going to be an ironclad fortress. The planning process became my sanctuary. Liam and I threw ourselves into creating the perfect day. We found the venue of our dreams, the Hawthorne Botanical Mansion. It was a spectacular, historic estate nestled on 50 acres of manicured gardens, featuring a massive glass conservatory where the reception would be held under the stars. It was exclusive, breathtaking, and astronomically expensive. The venue fee alone was $50,000. Liam's parents generously offered to cover the catering and floral arrangements, while Liam and I happily drained our savings to secure the Hawthorne. We wired the $50,000 deposit, signed the 50-page contract, and locked it in. It was real. We were getting married in a fairy tale. But a fairy tale always has a villain, and mine was currently lobbying my parents to be the maid of honor. I had initially asked my best friend from college, Sarah, to stand beside me. When my parents found out, the fallout was apocalyptic. They showed up at my apartment unannounced, my mother weeping openly, my father pacing my living room like a caged animal. "How can you do this to your sister?" my mother sobbed, clutching a tissue to her chest. "After the trauma of her false pregnancy, she is so fragile right now. If you exclude her from your bridal party, it will break her. You are tearing this family apart." "She hijacked my engagement party, Mom," I yelled, finally losing my temper. "She lied about being pregnant to steal the spotlight. Why would I want her standing next to me on the one day that is supposed to be about me and Liam?" "She was confused," my father bellowed, pointing a finger at me. "She is your flesh and blood. If she is not standing up there with you, your mother and I will not be attending. We will not support a wedding that deliberately ostracizes our daughter." It was a blatant, manipulative ultimatum. I looked at Liam, who was standing quietly in the corner, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. He gave me a microscopic nod, a silent communication that said, "Whatever you decide, I have your back." I broke. I was exhausted, beaten down by decades of this exact same dynamic. I wanted my parents at my wedding. I wanted the illusion of a happy family, just for one day. I caved. "Fine," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "She can be a bridesmaid, but Sarah is my maid of honor. That is non-negotiable." My parents instantly brightened, the tears vanishing as if a switch had been flipped. They hugged me, praised my maturity, and left. I collapsed onto the couch, already dreading the months to come. Adding Chloe to the bridal party was like dropping a live grenade into a basket of kittens. From day one, she was a nightmare. She hated the bridesmaid dresses I picked out, a beautiful, soft sage green. She claimed the color made her look jaundiced, and demanded I change the entire color palette of the wedding to blush pink, because pink complemented her undertones better. When I refused, she dragged her feet on ordering the dress, intentionally missing the tailor's deadlines, forcing me to pay exorbitant rush fees just to ensure she had something to wear. At my bachelorette party, a low-key weekend at a cabin by a lake, she spent the entire time pouting in the corner, complaining about the lack of cell service, refusing to participate in any games, and making loud, snide comments about how my engagement ring was a little ostentatious and trying too hard. She managed to bring my other bridesmaids to tears twice in 48 hours. But I gritted my teeth. I employed a strategy of aggressive gray rocking. I gave her no emotional reactions. I smiled tightly, thanked her for her input, and continued doing exactly what I wanted. I thought I was managing her. I thought the worst she could do was throw a tantrum at the reception, which Liam and Arthur had already hired discreet security to handle. I thought the finish line was in sight. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, the simmering tension finally boiled over. It was a Sunday afternoon. We were at my parents' house for a mandatory family dinner. The stress of the final wedding preparations had me running on caffeine and pure adrenaline. The final head count was due to the caterers on Monday. The seating chart was a geometric nightmare, and I was just trying to get through the meal so I could go home and sleep. Chloe was sitting across from me, pushing her peas around her plate with an infuriatingly smug expression. She had been unusually quiet all evening. "So," Chloe said suddenly, dropping her fork. The clatter echoed in the quiet dining room. "I need to make a few additions to the guest list." I looked up, my fork pausing halfway to my mouth. "The guest list is closed, Chloe. The final head count is due tomorrow morning. The seating chart is printed." "Well, unprint it," she said breezily, taking a sip of her wine. "I'm bringing Jessica, Morgan, Taylor, and Britt, and maybe Britt's new boyfriend if he's in town. So that's 5 extra seats. Just put them at my table." I stared at her, genuinely stunned by the audacity. Jessica, Morgan, Taylor, and Britt were Chloe's coven of toxic, mean girlfriends. They were notoriously loud, obnoxious, and historically cruel to me throughout high school and college. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice flat. "It's a strictly capped 150-person plated dinner. It's $250 a plate. I am not paying over $1,000 for your friends to come drink my open bar, nor do I want them there. You have a +1. Bring a date." "I don't have a date," Chloe snapped, her eyes narrowing. "And I refuse to sit there looking like a pathetic spinster while you parade around in your white dress. I need my support system." "Then your support system can wait for you at a bar after the reception," Liam interjected, his voice dangerously calm. "The guest list is finalized, Chloe." End of discussion. Chloe ignored him, turning her venomous gaze to my parents. "Mom, Dad, tell her, she's being a bridezilla. I'm in the bridal party, I should get a say in who I celebrate with." My mother shifted uncomfortably, clearing her throat. "Well, sweetie, surely a few more chairs wouldn't hurt. We can pay for their plates. It would make your sister so much more comfortable." "No," I said, my voice rising, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The venue has a strict fire code limit. The tables only seat 8. I am not rearranging the entire layout 2 weeks before the wedding so Chloe can hold court with her high school bullies. The answer is no." Chloe slammed her hands down on the table. "Fine," she shrieked. "If you're going to be a dictatorial bitch about it, then I have an announcement of my own. I'm not wearing that hideous sage green rag you forced on me." I blinked. "What are you talking about? You picked it up from the tailor yesterday." "I threw it in the trash," Chloe sneered, leaning forward, her eyes locked onto mine with a terrifying manic intensity. "I went shopping today. I bought a new dress. It's floor length, it's silk, and it's champagne." Champagne? White. She was planning to wear a white silk gown to stand next to me at the altar. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Even my parents looked horrified. A line had been crossed, a boundary so universally understood that even their Olympic-level enabling couldn't justify it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I looked at my sister, looking at the ugly, rotting jealousy that had consumed her entire soul, and I felt nothing but a cold, absolute clarity. "If you show up to my wedding in a white dress," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that commanded the entire room, "the security team will not let you through the front gate. You will be escorted off the premises by off-duty police officers. If you try to fight them, you will be arrested for trespassing. Do not test me, Chloe. I am done." I stood up, threw my napkin on the table, grabbed Liam's hand, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. I ignored my mother wailing my name. I ignored my father shouting. We got into Liam's car and drove away. For the next 4 days, there was total, unprecedented silence. No angry texts. No passive-aggressive Facebook posts. No tearful voicemails from my mother begging me to apologize. Nothing. I thought I had finally won. I thought the threat of public humiliation and security guards had finally forced Chloe into submission. I thought I had drawn a line in the sand that she was too cowardly to cross. I spent those 4 days finalizing the floral arrangements, picking up our wedding bands, and breathing a massive sigh of relief, believing the storm had finally passed. I was so incredibly, foolishly naive. I didn't realize that Chloe hadn't retreated to lick her wounds. She hadn't surrendered. Her silence wasn't defeat, it was focus. She had simply realized that if she couldn't control my wedding, she was going to annihilate it entirely. And because my parents still shared an old Apple ID, and because I had used my father's iPad to log into my Gmail account 3 months ago to show him a catering menu and forgot to log out. She had the keys to the kingdom. Which brings me back to the dark of my living room, staring at the screen, the blue light reflecting off the tears that finally began to fall. The cancellation confirmation. The $50,000 refund check, the P.O. box, the Hawthorne was gone, 2 weeks out and I had no venue. Chloe had struck the killing blow, or at least she thought she had. The blue light of the laptop screen burned into my retinas, but I couldn't blink. I couldn't breathe. The silence of the apartment was suddenly deafening, broken only by the rhythmic, oblivious hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in a fleece blanket that suddenly offered no warmth, staring at the single line of text sitting innocuously in my Gmail trash folder. Cancellation confirmation. Your reservation at the Hawthorne Botanical Mansion has been revoked, and the $50,000 refund has been issued. My brain simply refused to process the words. It felt like trying to read a foreign language while falling from a great height. I read it again, and again. Revoked, refund, issued. My hand hovered over the trackpad, my fingers trembling so violently that I accidentally clicked out of the window. A sharp, involuntary gasp escaped my lips, sounding loud and terrified in the quiet room. I frantically alt-tabbed back to the browser, my heart hammering a frantic, jagged rhythm against my ribs. I opened the email. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a spam phishing attempt. It was a formal, automated receipt from the Hawthorne Botanical Mansion's billing department, complete with their elegant ivy leaf letterhead. The timestamp read Tuesday, 2:14 p.m., 4 days ago, exactly 2 days after my blow-up with Chloe at my parents' dining room table. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. I clicked on the Details drop-down menu in the email header. It was addressed to my primary email, but my eyes darted to the thread attached below it. It was a chain of correspondence. I hadn't seen it because it had been permanently bypassed from my inbox, read, and immediately dragged to the trash. I scrolled down, nausea twisting my stomach into a tight, agonizing knot. From my email address to Beatrice Vance, Events Coordinator, Hawthorne Botanical. Date, Monday 9:05 a.m. Subject, urgent. Tragic cancellation of wedding event 8849. Dear Beatrice, I am writing this to you with a completely broken heart. Due to an unforeseen and devastating medical emergency within my immediate family, Liam and I are forced to indefinitely postpone our wedding scheduled for 2 weeks from now. We are absolutely crushed, but family must come first, and we simply cannot proceed with a celebration under these tragic circumstances. I have reviewed the cancellation policy in our contract. I understand we are past the 30-day window for a full refund, but given the severe medical nature of this emergency, I am begging you to reconsider the 50% penalty. We desperately need these funds for incoming hospital bills. Please let me know if there is any grace you can offer us. I am too distraught to speak on the phone right now, so please keep all communication to this email. Devastated, but grateful for your understanding. My name? I slapped my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. The sheer, pathological audacity of it, the calculated manipulation, incoming hospital bills, tragic circumstances. It was Chloe. It was so obviously, glaringly Chloe. The melodramatic vocabulary, the the playing of the ultimate victim card. It was her signature, her magnum opus of sabotage. But it got worse. I kept scrolling down to Beatrice's reply, which had come 3 hours later. "Oh my goodness, my name. I am so incredibly sorry to hear this. Please know that the entire team at Hawthorne is sending our deepest prayers to your family. I just spoke with our director of finance. Given the extraordinary and tragic nature of your situation, the ownership has authorized a one-time override of the contract penalties. We will release your date and issue a full $50,000 refund of your deposit immediately. Please confirm the mailing address on file is still correct for the physical check." And then, the killing blow. The final email in the chain, sent by me on Tuesday morning. "Beatrice, words cannot express my gratitude. You are an angel. Because of the medical emergency, Liam and I are temporarily relocating to be closer to the treatment center. Please do not send the check to our apartment address on file, as we will not be there to receive it and mail theft is a concern. Please expedite the refund check to our secure, temporary P.O. box at the following address." Below it was the address of a P.O. box located in a UPS store. A UPS store that I had driven past 100 times because it was nestled in the strip mall directly across the street from Chloe's luxury high-rise apartment complex. I sat there in the dark, the horrifying reality washing over me in freezing waves. Chloe hadn't just ruined my wedding. She had impersonated me. She had defrauded a vendor. She had hijacked $50,000 of Liam's parents' money, redirecting a six-figure check into a box she held the key to. She was planning to let me wake up on the morning of my wedding, put on my veil, and drive to the Hawthorne Botanical Mansion only to find the iron gates padlocked, or worse, someone else walking down my aisle. And while I was standing in the gravel, humiliated and broken, she would be sitting on 50 grand. I didn't realize I was hyperventilating until the edges of my vision started to go dark. I shoved the laptop off my lap, letting it tumble onto the rug, and sprinted for the bedroom. I hit the doorframe, my shoulders slamming into the wood, and threw the door open. The bedroom was bathed in the soft, gray light of the street lamps filtering through the blinds. Liam was asleep, one arm thrown over his eyes, his breathing deep and even. "Liam," I gasped, my voice cracking, sounding like a dying animal. I stumbled to the edge of the mattress and grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. "Liam, wake up, please wake up." He jolted awake instantly. There was no grogginess, no slow transition from sleep to wakefulness. The panic in my voice acted like an adrenaline shot. He sat up, the sheets pooling around his waist, his eyes wide and immediately focused on my face. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice thick with sleep but laced with alarm. His hands reached out, gripping my arms. "Are you hurt? What's wrong?" "The wedding," I choked out, a sob finally tearing free from my throat. I couldn't hold it back anymore. The dam broke. I collapsed against his chest, my fingers digging into his t-shirt. "It's gone, Liam. She canceled it. Chloe canceled the wedding." I felt his entire body go rigid. For a second, he didn't breathe. Then, he gently but firmly pushed me back just enough so he could look me in the eye. "What do you mean she canceled it? How? That's impossible, the venue is locked." "She got into my email," I sobbed, the words tumbling out of me in a frantic, disjointed mess. "She used the iPad at my parents' house. The one I used at Christmas to show them the menu. I never logged out of Safari. She emailed the venue pretending to be me. She told them someone was dying. She got the refund check sent to a P.O. box in her neighborhood. It's gone, Liam. The deposit is gone. The date is gone. She deleted the emails. I only found them in the trash folder because I was looking for the florist's invoice." Liam didn't speak. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He threw the covers off, swung his legs out of bed, and walked into the living room. I followed him, my legs shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall in the hallway. When I reached the living room, Liam had already picked up the laptop from the floor. He was standing by the window, the blue light illuminating his face. I watched as his expression shifted. The alarm faded, replaced by something entirely different. Something cold, calculating, and terrifyingly calm. It was the face of a man who spent his days ruthlessly dismantling corporate mergers. He read the email chain in total silence. I stood a few feet away, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling entirely hollowed out. She covered her tracks, I whispered, my voice trembling. She emptied the inbox. If I hadn't accidentally clicked on the trash folder, I wouldn't have known until the day of. Liam clicked the mouse a few times. He was navigating away from the email, pulling up my Google account security settings. Let's confirm it, he said, his voice eerily level. Device activity. He scrolled down the screen. There it is, an Apple iPad, logged in from an IP address in your parents' zip code on Monday at 8:50 a.m. 10 minutes before the first email was sent to the venue. He closed the lid of the laptop with a soft click. He set it down on the coffee table and turned to look at me. The silence in the room was suffocating. I waited for him to explode. I waited for him to yell, to punch a wall, to demand we drive to my parents' house right now and kick the door down. That's what a normal person would do. But Liam just looked at the wall clock. It was 4:15 a.m. We can't do anything for 4 hours and 45 minutes, he said quietly. What? I asked, bewildered. The Hawthorne offices open at 9. We can't confirm the status of the check or the venue until Beatrice gets to her desk. He walked over to me, wrapping his arms around me and pulling me tightly against his chest. I buried my face in his neck, the scent of his skin grounding me just a fraction. We are going to make coffee, we are going to sit on the couch, and we are going to wait until 9 o'clock. Those next 4 hours were an exercise in psychological torture. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I sat on the couch, my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the digital clock on the microwave in the kitchen. 4:50, 5:30, 6:15. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. Liam sat next to me, his laptop resting on his knees, typing furiously. He wasn't looking at wedding stuff. He was pulling up bank statements, reviewing the original Hawthorne contract, and researching the exact legal definitions of wire fraud and identity theft in our state. The sun eventually began to rise, casting long, pale shadows across the living room floor. The city outside started to wake up. Trash trucks rumbled down the street. Sirens wailed in the distance. The world was continuing on, entirely oblivious to the fact that my life had just been detonated. At 8:45 a.m., I went to the bathroom and splashed freezing cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by deep, bruised-looking circles. I looked like a ghost. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the frantic beating of my heart. Be the bigger person, a small, pathetic voice echoed in the back of my mind. The voice of my mother, ingrained into my psyche for 27 years. Just let it go. Don't make a scene. It's just a wedding. You can get married at the courthouse. Don't ruin the family over this. I gripped the edges of the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. For the first time in my life, the voice didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel violently, furiously angry. I was done being the bigger person. The bigger person was currently standing in the ruins of her future because she had allowed a monster to sit at her table. I walked back out to the living room. Liam had his phone on speaker, resting on the coffee table. It was 8:59 a.m. Ready? He asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., Liam hit dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hawthorne Botanical Mansion, Events and Catering, this is Beatrice speaking. How can I help you today? Hearing her cheerful, professional voice was like taking a bullet. I squeezed my eyes shut. Liam leaned forward. Beatrice, good morning. This is Liam Vance, calling regarding wedding event 8849. I have my fiancé on the line as well. There was a sudden, sharp pause on the other end of the line. When Beatrice spoke again, the cheerful customer service tone had completely vanished, replaced by a hushed, horrified confusion. Mr. Vance? Oh my goodness. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I am so incredibly sorry. Your fiancé told me you were dealing with a severe medical crisis. How is your family holding up? Is everyone all right? I leaned toward the phone, my voice shaking. Beatrice, there is no medical crisis. Everyone is perfectly healthy. I am calling because I need to know the status of our reservation for the 14th. The silence on the line stretched out for 10 agonizing seconds. I could hear Beatrice breathing. I could hear the faint sound of a keyboard clacking in the background of her office. I don't understand, Beatrice stammered, her voice rising an octave in panic. I received an email from your account on Monday. You begged me to cancel. You said it was a life-or-death family emergency. I processed the cancellation. The owners approved the penalty override because of the circumstances. I did not send those emails, Beatrice, I said, my voice hardening, the anger finally burning through the shock. My email account was compromised by a family member. They impersonated me. They canceled the wedding without my knowledge or consent. Please, Beatrice, tell me the date is still open. Tell me you just put a hold on it. Oh, God, Beatrice whispered. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had just facilitated a massive disaster. Oh my God, I can't. The 14th was our most requested date of the year. The moment I released the hold in the system on Tuesday afternoon, our waitlist auto-notified the next client. A corporate tech firm booked it immediately for a 4-day executive retreat. They paid the deposit in full via wire transfer yesterday morning. The date is gone. I don't have another Saturday open until October of next year. The floor seemed to drop out from underneath me. It was real. It wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. The hawthorn was gone. The refund check, Liam interjected, his voice slicing through Beatrice's panicked apologies like a scalpel. Beatrice, you received an email redirecting the $50,000 deposit to a P.O. box. Tell me you haven't mailed it yet. Beatrice was openly crying now. I submitted the rush order to our finance department on Tuesday. The check was cut on Wednesday morning. It was put in the outgoing USPS certified mail bin. It was picked up yesterday afternoon. Can you cancel it? Liam demanded. Stop payment on the check immediately. I can't, she sobbed. It's a cashier's check drawn directly from our corporate holding account. That's how we process rush refunds. The bank requires a 30-day waiting period to declare a cashier's check lost or stolen before they will issue a stop payment. If whoever has that check deposits it into an ATM or a mobile app, it's going to clear. Liam closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. Do you have the tracking number for the certified mail? Yes, Beatrice sniffled, furiously typing. Yes, I have it right here. It's... Tracking shows it arrived at the local sorting facility at 4:00 a.m. this morning. It's scheduled for delivery to the P.O. box today by 5:00 p.m. Thank you, Beatrice, Liam said, his voice devoid of any emotion. Do not email my account anymore. Do not attempt to contact my fiancé. Send all further communication to my direct work line. We will be in touch. He ended the call. The silence rushed back into the room, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the black screen of the phone. $50,000. It was going to land in Chloe's P.O. box today, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The image of Chloe standing in my parents' dining room flashed in my mind. Her smug, victorious face. The way she had declared she was wearing a white dress, knowing full well she had already pulled the pin on the grenade that would destroy the entire day. She was probably sitting in her apartment right now, sipping a latte, waiting for the mail carrier, giddy with the anticipation of my impending breakdown. I lunged for my own cell phone sitting on the coffee table. My hands were shaking furiously as I unlocked the screen and pulled up my contacts. I scrolled down to my mother's name. What are you doing? Liam asked, his hand shooting out to cover the screen of my phone. I'm calling my parents, I said, my voice rising to a hysterical pitch. I'm calling them, and then I'm calling the police. She stole $50,000, Liam. She stole our wedding. I'm going to have her arrested right now. I'm going to ruin her life. Liam didn't pull his hand away. He looked at me, his dark eyes intense and unyielding. If you call your parents right now, what happens? He asked calmly. They find out what she did. I yelled, hot tears spilling down my cheeks. No, they don't, Liam countered, his voice steady. If you call your mother screaming, she immediately calls Chloe. Chloe panics. She realizes she's been caught. She intercepts the mail, rips the check into tiny pieces, flushes it down the toilet, and deletes her P.O. box. And then she denies everything. I froze, the phone slipping slightly in my grasp. She'll say you're crazy, Liam continued, painting the grim reality with terrifying accuracy. She'll say you're a stressed-out bride looking for a scapegoat because you messed up your own booking. She'll point out that the emails came from your account. Your parents will believe her. They will beg you to drop it. The police will look at it as a civil family dispute with no physical evidence, and they won't lift a finger. You will look like the villain, she will play the victim, and the hawthorn will still be gone. I let go of the phone. It dropped onto the coffee table with a thud. He was right. He was entirely, horrifyingly right. If I tipped my hand now, Chloe would slip right through my fingers like water, just like she always did. She would face zero consequences, and I would be left standing in the ashes of my own life. So what do? I whispered, feeling utterly defeated. We just let her have the check. We let her win. Liam slowly picked up his phone. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked like a man who was about to go to war. No, Liam said softly, dialing a number. She only wins if we play by her rules. We aren't going to call your parents. We aren't going to tell Chloe a damn thing. We are going to let her sit there, completely oblivious, believing she is the smartest person in the room. He raised the phone to his ear. Who are you calling? I asked, my voice barely above a breath. Liam looked at me, a cold, sharp smile touching the corner of his mouth. I'm calling my father. Arthur Vance answered on the second ring. His voice, even at 9 in the morning on a Saturday, was a resonant baritone that commanded immediate authority. Liam, I thought you were spending the morning finalizing the seating charts. Tell me you aren't calling to ask for more of my scotch for the groomsmen. Liam didn't laugh. He didn't offer a polite greeting. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and flinty, and said, Dad, we have a situation. A catastrophic one. The shift on the other end of the line was palpable. The jovial father vanished. The ruthless CEO, who had built a real estate empire from the ground up, materialized instantly. Define catastrophic. Chloe, Liam said, the name tasting like poison in the quiet of our living room. She gained unauthorized access to the email accounts. She impersonated her sister, contacted the Hawthorne, and canceled the wedding under the guise of a medical emergency. The date is gone, Dad, booked by a corporate retreat, and she redirected the $50,000 deposit check to a private P.O. box in her neighborhood. It's out for delivery today. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. When Arthur finally spoke, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Where are you two right now? At the apartment. Do not call the police, do not call her parents. Do not, under any circumstances, contact Chloe, Arthur ordered, his voice terrifyingly calm. I am sending a car for you right now. Pack an overnight bag, you are coming to the estate. We are going to handle this internally before we bring in the authorities. Give me 45 minutes. The line clicked dead. The next 45 minutes were a blur of frantic, silent packing. I threw clothes into a duffel bag with trembling hands, my mind reeling. I was terrified, yes, but beneath the terror, a strange, crystalline numbness was beginning to take root. The panic was receding, leaving behind a cold, desolate landscape. When the sleek, black town car pulled up to our building, we climbed into the back seat without a word to the driver. The partition was rolled up. We rode in silence as the city skyline gave way to the sprawling, manicured estates of the Hamptons. When we arrived at the Vance estate, Arthur was waiting for us on the front steps, flanked by two men I had never seen before. One was in a sharp, tailored suit with a briefcase clutched in his hand. The other was a broad-shouldered man in a subdued tactical jacket, his eyes scanning the driveway with professional detachment. Arthur didn't offer hugs or platitudes. He kissed my cheek, his grip on my shoulder firm and grounding. Inside, he said simply, to the study. Arthur's study was a massive, mahogany-paneled room that smelled of old paper and expensive leather. He gestured for Liam and me to sit on the Chesterfield sofa. The man in the suit sat across from us, opening his briefcase, while the broader man stood quietly by the door. This is Marcus, my chief corporate counsel, Arthur said, gesturing to the man in the suit. And this is David. He runs the private security and investigative firm my company retains. Liam, tell them everything. Leave nothing out. Liam recounted the nightmare with surgical precision. He laid out the timeline, the IP address logs, Beatrice's confirmation, and the USPS tracking number. As he spoke, Marcus took rapid notes, his expression unreadable. David remained perfectly still, his eyes locked onto Liam. When Liam finished, the silence in the study was absolute. I felt like I was awaiting a verdict. Well, Marcus finally said, leaning back in his chair and tapping his pen against his chin. From a strictly legal standpoint, this isn't just a malicious prank. It's a symphony of felonies. Identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, and grand larceny. The moment she opened that P.O. box with the intent to intercept funds that did not belong to her, she crossed into federal territory. "Can we stop the check?" I asked, my voice small, feeling entirely out of my depth. "Can we intercept the mail carrier?" "We could," David spoke up, his voice a low gravel. "I could have a man at that UPS store in 20 minutes, but if we intercept the check, she doesn't take possession of it." I looked at him, confused. "Isn't that the point? To get the money back?" Arthur leaned forward, resting his elbows on his massive oak desk. His eyes, so similar to Liam's, were completely merciless. "If we stop the check now, my dear, she simply claims her account was hacked. She claims ignorance. Your parents will believe her. The police will decline to investigate a thwarted, non-violent familial dispute without hard proof of who pressed the keys. She walks away, and you are still out of a venue." Arthur paused, letting the reality sink in. "If you want true justice, if you want to ensure she can never, ever do something like this to you again, you cannot stop her. You have to let her commit the crime." A shiver ran down my spine. "You want me to let her steal $50,000? "I want you to let her try," Marcus corrected smoothly. "David already has operatives en route to the UPS store. They are setting up surveillance. They will document her entering the facility, opening the box, and retrieving the envelope. Once she has the check in her possession, she is legally holding stolen funds. But the real trap springs when she tries to deposit it." "Exactly," Arthur said, a predatory smile touching his lips. "She's greedy, but she's not a professional criminal. She'll try to deposit a massive corporate cashier's check into her personal bank account. That triggers a mandatory hold and a currency transaction report. My bank will instantly flag the discrepancy. The moment she signs the back of that check and hands it to a teller, the trap shuts. She goes from a suspect to a definitively documented felon." I stared at Arthur, the sheer scale of the retaliation washing over me. This wasn't just malicious compliance. This was total, orchestrated annihilation. And as I sat there, thinking about the decades of ruined birthdays, the hijacked graduation, the stolen engagement party, and the absolute destruction of my wedding day, I didn't feel an ounce of pity. "Okay," I breathed, my voice steadying. The peacekeeper in me had officially died. "Let her take it." "Good," Arthur said, nodding approvingly. "David will monitor the P.O. box. Marcus will coordinate with the bank and local law enforcement to have the arrest warrants drafted and waiting for the moment she attempts the deposit. Now, we have a much more pressing logistical issue." Arthur stood up and walked over to a sidebar, pouring a small measure of scotch into a crystal glass. "You are 2 weeks away from your wedding date, and you have no venue. The Hawthorne is gone." The reminder hit me like a physical blow. The adrenaline of the War Council briefly faded, replaced by the crushing grief of reality. Tears pricked my eyes. "I know, we'll just have to go to the courthouse. We can try to get a dinner reservation somewhere for the immediate family. But all the guests, the catering, the dress." "Nonsense," Arthur barked, turning around to face me. "You are marrying my son. You are a Vance now. Vances do not get married in sterile courthouses because of the pathetic tantrums of jealous siblings." He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. 2 years ago, my firm acquired a controlling interest in an ultra-luxury eco-resort development on a private island off the coast of Maine. It's called the Sovereign. It is currently entirely closed to the public for final renovations. It has a historic lighthouse, a cliffside glass conservatory overlooking the Atlantic, a fully staffed Michelin star culinary team currently doing dry runs, and a private dock. My jaw practically unhinged. I looked at Liam, who looked equally stunned. "Dad, the Sovereign, that's $100 million property. It's not even open." "It opens for you," Arthur said simply, pressing the phone to his ear. "I'm the chairman of the board. I can authorize a private event. We will fly the floral arrangements in. We will charter private ferries from the mainland for the guests. The catering team will use your exact menu from the Hawthorne as their final stress test. It will be entirely off the grid, exclusively accessible by our approved manifests, and breathtakingly beautiful." He lowered the phone slightly, his eyes softening as he looked at me. It will not cost you a single dime. Consider it an early wedding gift, but it comes with one absolute, non-negotiable condition. Anything, I whispered, tears of pure, overwhelming gratitude finally spilling over. Total, absolute secrecy, Arthur commanded. Your sister believes she has ruined you. For the next 2 weeks, you must let her believe she has succeeded. If she catches wind that you have a backup plan, let alone an upgraded one, she will attempt to sabotage the logistics, or worse, she will realize we know about the fraud and destroy the check. You must look her in the eye and play the victim. I wiped my cheeks, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. Arthur, I've spent 27 years pretending my sister's abuse didn't hurt me. I think I can spend 14 days pretending it did. And so, the secret operation began. We converted one of the guest houses on the Vance estate into a war room. Liam, myself, and my absolute saint of a maid of honor, Sarah, who had been read into the situation and spent a solid 10 minutes screaming obscenities about Chloe before rolling up her sleeves, sat around a massive dining table covered in spreadsheets and burner phones. We had 150 guests to contact. We couldn't send a mass email. The risk of a screenshot leaking back to Chloe or my parents was too high. It had to be done via voice, one by one. The script was meticulous. We called our closest friends, Liam's extended family, and the colleagues we trusted with our lives. Hi, it's my name/Liam. Listen to me very carefully. Do not repeat this to anyone. There has been a severe, malicious security breach regarding the wedding venue, orchestrated by a member of the bridal party. The wedding is still happening, but the location has changed. We are relocating to a secure, private island. All your travel and ferry accommodations will be covered, but if a single word of this leaks, the perpetrator will evade legal consequences. Are you with us? The responses were a symphony of shock, outrage, and absolute, unwavering loyalty. People love a wedding, but people ferociously love a covert operation. Guests were practically swearing blood oaths of silence. Liam's groomsmen offered to act as bouncers at the ferry docks. My college friends promised to block Chloe on every social media platform immediately so she couldn't track their locations. The hardest part, by far, was managing the bridal party. Chloe's coven, Jessica, Morgan, Taylor, and Britt, were technically bridesmaids, forced upon me by my mother's incessant pleading. We couldn't exclude them from the group chats without triggering an immediate alarm. So, I weaponized the group chat. For the next 10 days, I delivered an Oscar-worthy performance of a bride slowly losing her mind to stress. I sent frantic texts to the bridal group chat at 2:00 a.m. Guys, I'm freaking out. The Hawthorne isn't returning my calls about the final table linens. Has anyone heard from Beatrice at the venue? I think their email server is down. I'm so stressed. Chloe's responses were a masterclass in sociopathic glee masquerading as sympathy. Awa babe, take a breath, I'm sure it's fine. They're probably just busy. Don't let the stress ruin your complexion. Everything happens for a reason, sweetie. Just trust the universe. Sparkles. Reading her texts made me want to throw my phone into the ocean, but I swallowed the bile and replied with crying emojis. I was feeding the beast. I was giving her exactly what she wanted, the illusion of my suffering. The physical performances were even harder. The Sunday before the wedding, my parents hosted a final bridal luncheon at their house. The entire toxic bridal party was there. I walked in looking deliberately disheveled. I had skipped makeup, tied my hair into a messy bun, and carried a binder full of seating charts that I clutched to my chest like a life preserver. Chloe was radiant. She was wearing a perfectly tailored designer jumpsuit, sipping a mimosa, holding court in the living room. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. "Oh, honey," Chloe cooed, rushing over to hug me. She smelled like expensive perfume and deceit. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" "Just stressed," I mumbled, keeping my eyes downcast, playing the beaten dog. "The Hawthorne is being so difficult about the vendor load-in times. I just want this week to be over." Jessica, one of her toxic minions, snickered from the couch. "Well, you know what they say. If the planning is a disaster, the marriage will be, well, you know." My mother shot Jessica a mild warning look but quickly pivoted. "Now girls, let's keep it positive. Your sister is just having pre-wedding jitters. Come sit, I made quiche." I sat through that 2-hour luncheon vibrating with suppressed rage. Chloe spent the entire time subtly twisting the knife. She talked at length about the white silk gown she had bought, loudly debating which diamond earrings would look best with it. She talked about how excited she was to take photos in the Hawthorne's famous glass conservatory. She looked me right in the eyes, smiling a brilliant, sociopathic smile, knowing full well she had stolen that conservatory from me. "Just wait," I chanted internally, digging my fingernails into my palms under the table. "Just wait until the rain comes." Because that was the final, brilliant piece of the trap. David, Arthur's head of security, had proven himself to be worth his weight in gold. When I told him I needed a decoy location to send Chloe to, he hadn't just found an address, he had found a masterpiece of misery. It's an abandoned industrial cannery down by the shipping docks in the neighboring county, David had explained, sliding a satellite photo across the war room table. The Vance Corporation bought the land for redevelopment, but it's currently a condemned zone. It's surrounded by a 10-foot chain-link fence, the ground is entirely unpaved mud and gravel, and it is actively rusting. It is 45 miles away from the ferry docks you'll be using. "Is it safe?" Liam had asked, ever protective. "Perfectly safe," David assured him. "It's secure, but it is entirely locked down. They will not be able to get inside. They will just be standing in the dirt." I looked at the weather forecast on my phone. A massive, unseasonal coastal storm was projected to hit the exact county of the cannery on the afternoon of the wedding. Torrential downpours, high winds, and a 50-degree temperature drop. "It's perfect," I had whispered. 3 days before the wedding, it was time to deploy the schedules. I sat at my laptop, Liam standing behind me, his hands resting heavily on my shoulders. I created 2 completely different PDFs. The first PDF was sent via a secure, encrypted link to the 150 real guests. It contained the GPS coordinates for the private charter ferry, the strict boarding times, and the dress code for the sovereign island. The second PDF was a bespoke, handcrafted work of art, designed exclusively for Chloe, Jessica, Morgan, Taylor, and Britt. I opened the bridal party group chat. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was the point of no return. If Chloe noticed a discrepancy, if she cross-referenced the address, the entire house of cards would collapse. "Hey girls," I typed, forcing my fingers to remain steady. Final schedule attached. "I have a massive surprise." Liam's parents wanted to treat the bridal party, so they booked an ultra-exclusive, VIP indoor-outdoor architectural space for our pre-wedding photo shoot and champagne toast before we head to the Hawthorne. It's highly secure, so the address is in the PDF. Please arrive at the VIP location by exactly 2:00 p.m. on Saturday in your full gowns and heels. Do not be late. The photographer is on a tight schedule. Can't wait. Sparkling heart. I attached the fake PDF. I hit send. Liam squeezed my shoulders. We stared at the screen, watching the little read receipts pop up under the message. Chloe read at 4:12 p.m. Jessica read at 4:13 p.m. A minute passed, then 2, my breath hitched in my throat. Had she figured it out? Was she checking the address? Then my phone buzzed. "Chloe, OMG, a VIP architectural space? That sounds amazing. We will be there at 2:00 p.m. sharp. So excited for your big day, sis." Clinking sparkles. She had bought it. She had swallowed the bait, the hook, and the sinker. She genuinely believed she was going to show up to a fancy VIP photo shoot, completely oblivious to the fact that she was driving 45 miles in the wrong direction to a condemned fish cannery. The next 48 hours moved with the terrifying, exhilarating speed of a runaway train. On Thursday, David's surveillance team confirmed that Chloe had visited the UPS store. She had signed for the certified mail. We had photographs of her walking back to her car, slipping the thick, Hawthorne-branded envelope into her designer purse. She had the $50,000. The felony was secured in her possession. On Friday, the logistics of the parent trap had to be executed. My parents were the ultimate wildcards. If they were allowed to drive themselves, they might call Chloe. They might realize she wasn't at the real venue. They needed to be contained. Arthur Vance, bless his ruthless heart, handled it personally. He called my father on Friday morning. "Richard, Arthur Vance here. Listen, Aliner and I want to treat you and your lovely wife to the true VIP experience tomorrow. I've arranged for one of my company's luxury, soundproofed executive sprinters to pick you up directly from your home at noon. It has a full champagne bar. We're doing an unplugged ride to the venue. We want you to relax, have a drink, and not worry about a single logistical phone call. We'll take your phones at the door of the sprinter and hand them back after the ceremony. My parents, utterly blinded by the illusion of status and free luxury alcohol, agreed instantly. They had no idea they were voluntarily stepping into a mobile Faraday cage that would transport them directly to a ferry, separating them from the mainland, and completely cutting off their ability to communicate with their golden child. Friday night, Liam and I stood on the balcony of our suite at the Sovereign. We had taken the early ferry over. The island was a masterpiece. The historic lighthouse cast a sweeping, golden beam across the churning, dark waters of the Atlantic. The glass conservatory glowed from within, filled with thousands of white roses and trailing ivy. It was more beautiful than the hawthorn could have ever dreamed of being. The wind was picking up. The air smelled of salt and impending rain. The coastal storm was rolling in, right on schedule. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the dark horizon. I wasn't the girl who had cried over a ruined blue dress anymore. I wasn't the girl who shrank herself down to make room for her sister's ego. I pulled out my phone and checked the weather app. For the zip code of the abandoned cannery, the forecast was uncompromising. 100% chance of torrential rain, severe thunderstorms, and localized flash flooding beginning exactly at 2:00 p.m. tomorrow. I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. The trap was armed. All that was left was for the clock to strike 2. I woke up on the morning of my wedding to the sound of the ocean breathing against the cliffs. The Sovereign was, in a word, spectacular. The bedroom of the bridal suite featured floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows that looked out over the churning, slate-gray Atlantic. The coastal storm had arrived on the mainland exactly as predicted, dragging a thick, bruised blanket of dark clouds across the sky. But out here on the private island, we were insulated. The resort's architectural marvel was the glass conservatory, a massive, heated, climate-controlled dome constructed into the very edge of the rocky bluffs. Inside, it was a fragrant, perfect spring day, overflowing with tens of thousands of white orchids, hydrangeas, and trailing English ivy. Outside, the wind howled and rain lashed against the reinforced glass, creating a cocoon of warm, defiant luxury. My best friend and true maid of honor, Sarah, walked into the suite carrying 2 steaming mugs of black coffee and a terrifyingly sharp smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Vanstaby," she purred, handing me a mug. "I just got off the phone with David. The Eagles are in the air." I took a sip of the scalding coffee, feeling the caffeine hit my bloodstream like a spark to a powder keg. "Talk to me." "Arthur's executive sprinter van arrived at your parents' house at noon on the dot," Sarah reported, checking her phone. "Your mother apparently wept at the sight of the champagne bar." The drivers smoothly collected their cell phones under the guise of the unplugged VIP transport experience. They are currently cruising toward the private ferry dock, completely in the dark, drinking Dom Perignon. They are secure. "And the target?" I asked, a cold thrill shivering down my spine. "David has 2 unmarked security vehicles tailing Chloe and her coven. They left her luxury apartment complex 15 minutes ago. They are piled into Jessica's white Range Rover. David said they are in full, floor-length silk gowns, practically bathing in self-tanner and setting spray. They are heading straight for the industrial corridor. And babe, it is absolutely pouring out there." I closed my eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. For 2 weeks, I had carried a boulder of anxiety in my chest, terrified that at any moment, Chloe would check the coordinates, or my mother would let something slip, or the entire house of cards would collapse. But we had made it. The board was set. The pieces were moving. There was no turning back now. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of hair, makeup, and quiet, triumphant champagne toasts with Sarah and my actual bridesmaids, the women who had stood by me without demanding a single ounce of my sanity. When I finally slipped into my dress, a sleek, minimalist masterpiece of ivory crepe with a dramatic, sweeping train, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I didn't look like the anxious peacekeeper who had begged her parents for scraps of validation. I looked like a queen standing in an iron fortress. At 1:15 p.m., there was a soft knock on the suite door. Liam walked in. Tradition dictated he wasn't supposed to see me until the altar, but we had burned the rulebook to ashes 2 weeks ago. He was wearing a custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, but his eyes were entirely focused on me. The breath physically caught in his throat. "You look," he started, his voice thick with emotion, shaking his head slightly. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." He crossed the room and took my hands, kissing my knuckles. "David just radioed," he said softly, his thumbs tracing the back of my hand. "Jessica's Range Rover just merged onto the coastal highway. They are 30 miles away from the cannery. The weather out there is biblical. Flash flood warnings have just been issued for the county." "Good," I whispered, stepping into his chest. "Let it rain." At 1:30 p.m., the ceremony began. Because my parents were delayed by the VIP transport, Eli Arthur expertly fed to the 150 guests already seated in the conservatory. Arthur Vance himself had asked for the honor of walking me down the aisle. As the string quartet began to play a soaring, instrumental rendition of our favorite song, the massive oak doors of the conservatory swung open. A collective gasp echoed through the cavernous glass room. The guests were seated on velvet chairs arranged in a semicircle around an altar that seemed to float over the churning ocean below. The storm raged against the glass, violently beautiful, while inside, the warmth, the candlelight, and the scent of orchids created an atmosphere of pure magic. Arthur offered me his arm. "Ready to become a Vance?" he murmured, a proud, fierce light in his eyes. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied. Walking down that aisle, looking at the faces of the people who truly loved and supported us, the bitterness of the last 2 weeks evaporated. I saw my colleagues wiping away tears. I saw Alina, Liam's mother, beaming with absolute joy. And standing at the end of the aisle, framed by a wall of white roses and a raging tempest, was Liam. The ceremony was a dream. The officiant spoke about resilience, about choosing each other in the face of adversity, words that carried a profound, secret weight for the two of us. We exchanged our rings. We spoke our vows, our voices steady and filled with absolute certainty. When Liam pulled me in for the kiss, the entire conservatory erupted in deafening cheers, their applause drowning out the sound of the thunder cracking against the glass above us. We had done it, we were married. The hawthorn was gone, the $50,000 was stolen, but sitting in that moment, I realized Chloe hadn't stolen my joy, she had only accidentally upgraded it. By the time we made our grand exit back down the aisle, the clock struck 2:15 p.m. The trap had officially sprung. Sarah was waiting for me in the bridal antechamber, bouncing on her heels with manic energy. She had her phone in one hand and mine in the other. "It's happening," she practically squealed, shoving my phone into my hands. "Look at the group chat. Look at it right now." I unlocked my screen. The bridal party group chat, which had been silent all morning, was currently exploding. Notification after notification rolled down the screen in a frantic, unhinged waterfall. 2:01 p.m., Chloe. "Hey, we're at the GPS pin, but I think the address you typed is wrong. We're in an industrial park." 2:04 p.m., Chloe, hello? "Pick up your phone." 2:06 p.m., Jessica, babe, it's pouring rain. "We are parked outside a rusted chain-link fence. There is no VIP venue here." 2:08 p.m., Chloe, answer me right now. My hair is starting to frizz. Where is the photographer?" 2:12 p.m., Morgan. This isn't funny. The road is turning to mud. Jessica's tires are spinning." 2:15 p.m., Chloe, I am calling you. Pick up the damn phone. We are locked out of some condemned fish factory and the wind is blowing my car door shut." I laughed. It started as a low chuckle and bubbled up into a full-throated, glorious laugh. I scrolled up, reading the escalating panic. Liam walked into the room, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked at my screen over my shoulder and smiled. "David just sent me the drone footage," he said, pulling out his own phone and tapping a video file. We crowded around his screen. High-definition, weather-stabilized drone footage showed a desolate, apocalyptic landscape. The abandoned cannery was a monstrosity of rusted corrugated metal and shattered windows, surrounded by a high, barbed wire fence. The dirt road leading to the gates had turned into a thick, swirling river of brown mud. And there, trapped in the middle of the deluge, was a pristine white Range Rover. The video showed the doors flying open. 5 figures stumbled out into the torrential, sideways rain. Even from 100 feet in the air, the disaster was immaculate. Chloe was wearing her white silk bridal gown. Within 3 seconds of stepping into the storm, the hem of the dress was dragged through the thick, clay-like mud. The wind whipped their painstakingly curled hair into chaotic, wet rats' nests. They were running up to the padlocked gate, shaking the chain, screaming into the void of an abandoned industrial park 45 miles from civilization. "They can't get back in the car," Liam noted, zooming in slightly. Jessica locked the keys inside when she panicked and ran for the gate. "They are entirely exposed." My phone vibrated violently in my hand, an incoming call from Chloe. I hit the red button, decline. Another text came through, furious and laced with the dawning realization that this wasn't an accident. 2:20 p.m., Chloe, what did you do? Where is the real venue? Mom and Dad aren't answering. You psychotic bitch, tell me where you are. Ready for your close-up? Liam asked, setting his champagne glass down. Born ready, I said. I grabbed Liam's lapels and pulled him close. Sarah held up her phone, framing the perfect shot. Behind us, through the antechamber doors, you could see the breathtaking expanse of the glass conservatory, the thousands of orchids, the elegant guests drinking champagne, and the wild, cinematic ocean in the background. We leaned in, smiling with the radiant, untouchable joy of two people who had just won a war and kissed. Snap. Sarah airdropped me the photo. I opened the bridal group chat. I attached the image. Underneath it, I typed my final message to my sister. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Enjoy the warehouse, Chloe. Check your mailbox on Monday for the federal lawsuit. Tell the girls I love their dresses. I hit send. I watched the delivered text pop up. A few seconds later, it changed to read. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't care about the screams, the rage, or the tantrum she was undoubtedly throwing in the freezing mud. I tapped her contact profile, hit block caller, and did the same for Jessica, Morgan, Taylor, and Britt. I locked my phone, tossed it onto a velvet armchair, and took my husband's hand. We walked back out to our reception, and we danced until our feet bled. The weekend was a utopia. We kept my parents entirely in the dark. They arrived at the reception just as dinner was being served, slightly confused about the lack of a mainland church, but too thoroughly lubricated by Arthur's top-shelf champagne to ask hard questions. When my mother vaguely asked where Chloe was, Arthur smoothly stepped in, suggesting that Chloe must have had car trouble in the storm and that we shouldn't let it ruin the beautiful evening. My parents, entirely incapable of dealing with conflict, accepted the excuse with terrifying ease and proceeded to eat lobster tail. But utopia ends, and Monday morning always arrives. At 9 a.m. on Monday, Liam and I were sitting in Arthur's corporate office in Manhattan, a speakerphone sitting in the center of a massive granite conference table. Marcus, the chief corporate counsel, sat across from us, meticulously reviewing a stack of legal filings. The trap was about to snap shut. She's moving, David's voice crackled over the speakerphone. His team had picked up surveillance on Chloe the moment she returned from the mud-soaked nightmare of the cannery. Target has left her apartment. She is entering the Chase Bank branch on 5th and Main. She has the Hawthorne envelope in her hand. Excellent, Marcus murmured, checking his watch. The branch manager has been fully briefed. The local precinct detective is standing by in the manager's office. We sat in silence, the air thick with tension. $50,000. It was an unfathomable amount of money to try and steal. It was the arrogance of a woman who genuinely believed the world would simply bend to her will because it always had. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. David, status, Arthur commanded, leaning toward the phone. Hold on, sir, David replied, background static masking his voice. Visual confirmed from the lobby operative. Target has approached the teller. She has endorsed the check. She's handing it over. Marcus smiled, a chilling, predatory expression. And there it is, the point of no return. The check is now legally tendered as stolen funds. The teller has instructed the target to wait while the check is verified. David continued, his voice calm. delivering the play-by-play of my sister's destruction. Teller has stepped away from the glass. She is signaling the manager's office. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pictured Chloe standing at the marble counter, probably wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her mud-stained pride from the weekend, tapping her foot, impatient for her stolen spoils to clear so she could buy a new designer bag to soothe her bruised ego. The manager is stepping out of the office, David reported. He is accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and 1 plainclothes detective. They are approaching the target. I gripped Liam's hand under the table. Target is arguing, David said. She is gesturing wildly. The detective is showing her the endorsed check. He is showing her a printed copy of the currency transaction report. Target is backing away. Officers are moving in, sir. They are putting her in handcuffs. A long, slow exhale escaped my lips. It was over. Target is crying, David observed, his tone entirely devoid of pity. She is resisting slightly, screaming about a misunderstanding. They are walking her out the front doors, putting her in the back of the cruiser. She is officially in custody for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Excellent work, David, Arthur said, pressing the mute button on the speakerphone. He looked at Marcus. File the civil suits. I want her assets frozen by noon. I want the P.O. box subpoenaed, and I want a restraining order filed on behalf of my son and daughter-in-law. Already done, Arthur, Marcus said, snapping his briefcase shut. My phone rang. I looked down at the screen. It was my mother. The news had obviously hit the family ecosystem like an asteroid. I picked up the phone and answered. I didn't put it on speaker. Hello? I said calmly. What did you do? My mother shrieked. The sound was so piercing I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She was completely hysterical, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Your sister is in jail. They wouldn't let her post bail. They said she stole $50,000 from Arthur's company. You have to call them. You have to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them to drop the charges right now. It wasn't a mistake, Mom, I said, my voice as cold and clear as the Atlantic Ocean. She hacked into my email. She canceled my wedding venue. She stole a $50,000 refund check to humiliate me, and then she tried to deposit it into her own bank account. She was just pulling a prank, my mother wailed, defaulting to the exact, pathetic defense she had used for 27 years. She was hurt that you didn't let her friends come. She wasn't really going to keep the money, she was just trying to teach you a lesson. You are ruining her life over a joke. Be the bigger person and fix this. I closed my eyes. The sheer, blinding delusion of it would have broken me a year ago. But the woman who had begged for her parents' approval had died in a glass conservatory, surrounded by people who actually loved her. No, Mom, I said. For my entire life, you told me to be the bigger person so you didn't have to deal with the monster you created. Chloe didn't pull a prank. She committed a federal felony. And for the first time in her life, she is going to face the consequences of her actions without you to shield her. If you do this, you are no longer my daughter. My mother screamed, issuing her final, desperate ultimatum. We will never speak to you again. I looked across the table at Liam, who was watching me with a mixture of immense pride and unwavering support. I looked at Arthur, who gave me a sharp, approving nod. That, I said softly to my mother, is the best wedding gift you could have ever given me. I hung up the phone. I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number. I set my phone down on the granite table and pushed it away. The silence in the office was profound, heavy with the weight of decades of trauma finally being severed. I felt light. I felt like I could finally breathe without checking to see who was watching. Chloe didn't get away with it. Marcus was a shark, and he ensured the prosecution threw the entire library at her. The paper trail she left was so glaringly incompetent that her court-appointed lawyer practically begged her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to felony wire fraud to avoid federal prison, but she was sentenced to 3 years of heavily monitored probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered to pay massive legal restitutions that completely bankrupted her. She lost her luxury apartment. She lost her cushy job. Her toxic coven of friends abandoned her the moment the scandal hit social media. My parents drained their retirement savings trying to pay her legal fees, shackling themselves to the very black hole they had nurtured. As for me and Liam, we didn't attend the sentencing. We were completely unreachable, sitting on the sun-drenched deck of an overwater bungalow in the Maldives. We spent a month drinking out of coconuts, swimming with manta rays, and falling deeper in love, completely free from the toxic gravitational pull of my past. Sometimes, justice isn't about being the bigger person. Sometimes, justice is watching the villain walk straight into a rusted, abandoned warehouse of their own making, while you sail away into paradise.